Interaction design is at the heart of creating engaging experiences. Whether you're creating a game, spatial design user interface, or immersive 3D experience, the state machine is used to bring your concepts to life quickly without code. In this video of Bezi 101, we'll be diving into the state machine. We'll be talking about the concept of statefulness, a recap of the user interface focusing on interaction design, how to create states, interactions, and triggers in the animation timeline. Let's start with the concept of statefulness. This term is used to describe if an asset within the canvas, usually an object, a group, component, or instance, has states. As the interaction designer, you will be creating interaction flows between multiple objects and their states. States are recordings of an asset's parameters composed in the Properties panel. These properties can be adjusted either by dialing them in or moving the assets around using the gizmo within the canvas. An asset can have multiple states, and those states can have many different property variants depending on your needs. A few examples of what properties can be adjusted include the position of an asset, its scale, visibility, material, and the asset's behaviors. Behaviors is a topic we'll be covering in depth later in Bezi 101. Moving on, certain objects have different properties based on what type of object they are. If you haven't already done so, we recommend that you watch the Objects Overview video to get a better understanding of the different types of objects and what properties they have. Something to note, if you wish to create nuanced layered interactions, you can do so by either having nested interactions, which is having objects with states within a group, or on a parent level through frames. Here's a side-by-side of what these two interactions look like. We recommend that you experiment with mixing and matching both methods, as some interaction flows are better than others. Let's recap in the areas of the user interface that are important to create and manage states. First is the mini state bar. This tool allows you to quickly create new states or switch between states. Next is the hierarchy panel. If an object has multiple states, you'll get an indication of what state an asset is in. You'll also see a lightning bolt icon next to an object if it's being used to trigger an interaction. As mentioned before, on the right side is the Properties panel, which you'll use to adjust an asset's different properties between states. And finally, the state machine in the bottom drawer. This area is where you'll be composing your interaction design flows by creating state nodes and interaction triggers between an asset's different states. Before we move on, let's expand the bottom drawer to give us more room to work in. You can do this by dragging the edge between the bottom drawer and the canvas. Now let's create a new state. To do so, select an object. Once selected, there are a couple of ways to make a state. You can do this in a mini state bar in the state machine, or by hovering your mouse over the side of a state node. A dot will appear. Click and drag that dot out to create a new state node. We recommend the latter, as it automatically creates an interaction flow, thus reducing the number of steps in your workflow. Now that you've created a new state, let's change its parameters. But before doing so, keep in mind the state an asset's in. The current state you're in is highlighted in the state machine and indicated in the mini state bar and hierarchy. Select your intended state, then move the object either through the gizmo or through the Transform Properties panel. To switch between states, select a different state in the state machine. Alternatively, you can do so with the mini state bar. If you have a project with a number of assets with multiple states, you can get them all to go back to base state or the starting point by going to the command center and searching for it. While we're talking about base states and starting points, let's talk about the different types of states and how to effectively use them. A state such as state 1 is a recording of the differences between itself and the base state. The base state is an asset's original state. Any changes made to the state are reflected in other states if the affected property is not already changed in that new state. In this example, transforms have been changed in state 1, but not the box's dimensions. Thus, the box dimension changes in the base state will reflect across the other states that have not already recorded a difference. The start state is the starting point. This is where an interaction design flow will start. By default, it starts in base state. However, you can change the flow so that it starts at a different state. It's up to you and your interaction design flow. Any state allows you to create interaction flows that work from all states in your interaction design, avoiding the need for multiple transitions. For example, pressing a close button to hide a panel regardless of its state, simplifying your interaction design flow. Now that we've gone through how to make states, let's create interaction transitions. First, let's learn how to connect and disconnect transitions. To connect a transition between an existing state, simply hover over the side of a node until a dot appears. Then drag to a state node. To delete, select the transition and press the backspace key. You may have noticed that when selecting or connecting transitions, an interaction event pops up. Here is where you will decide what makes your asset go from one state to another. By default, the interaction type is set to pointer down, and the trigger is set to self, which is currently the selected object. When you go into play mode to test your interaction, clicking the object will get it into its next state. Awesome! You've made your first interaction. Let's learn how to make much more advanced interaction designs by going through event settings. We won't be going through each in too much detail, as we'll be constantly adding more interaction types as Bezi evolves. With that said, we do recommend you try each interaction type out. Moving on, first let's start with the plus button on the right. This allows you to add more events to a single interaction flow. Some ideas for multiple events are to have two different buttons trigger a single interaction event, or to have a single button create branching flows depending on the interaction type, such as from a direct touch or from a tap. Below that, we have different event types. The default pointer down represents the click of a mouse button on a desktop, the tap on a smartphone, the pinch from a hand controller, and the trigger from a VR controller. Let's explore the different interaction types by clicking the drop-down. Above pointer down is auto, which will transform from one state to another without any input from a user. This event type is powerful for creating animations that go from state to state. It's also quite powerful when paired with the loop and ping pong options. Pointer up is similar to pointer down, but the interaction only happens when you lift up your default input method. A pointer down interaction on a grouped object paired with nested interactions that use the pointer up can help you create more interesting animated interaction designs. Hover in and out is similar to pointer up and down, except it's for when a cursor is hovering over your interaction trigger. Key down and key up lets you program keyboard keys as an interaction event for desktop-based projects. Collider enter and exit are for when two objects intersect with one another. We'll be going into more detail about that in another Bezi 101 video, so stay tuned. Direct touch inside and outside are for touch-based controllers. Right next to interaction type is the animation curve. Clicking on this reveals another pop-out. This is where you can choose the animation feel of how an interaction goes from one state to another. The default parameter works for most interactions. However, we recommend experimenting with different curves or even making custom ones to find out which feels better for your project. Next is trigger objects. This lets you identify what causes the currently selected object to transition from state to state. By default, it's set to self, but you can identify anything in your scene to trigger this interaction. To select the intended trigger object, click the trigger object icon, then select your intended trigger object in the canvas or in the hierarchy panel. You'll know what object is a trigger by the lightning bolt icon next to it in the hierarchy panel. If you want to reset it back to self or to remove it, click the menu icon to reveal the options to do so. Duration allows you to control how long the animation plays out. 1000 milliseconds is equivalent to 1 second. Delay is the time delay between when a trigger occurs and a transition starts. Playing with these options in tandem with the animation curve and auto event can help you create advanced animations. Now that you've learned how to create interaction design flows, here are a few ways to help you organize them. First, you're free to place your nodes wherever you want them to be. We recommend placing them in a logical order that represents the flow of interaction you plan to create, for example, a 360 camera movement. You can rename your states by double-clicking on the state node. Zoom in and zoom out using the buttons on the left or by pinching your touchpad or scrolling your mouse. You can also pan across by holding the spacebar or dragging the mouse in an empty space in the state machine. This button lets you focus on all the nodes of the object's states. And finally, the lock button prevents you from making any modifications to the selected object's states. To add and edit states on multiple objects at the same time, you can select them and create a new state. The number of objects or groups you have selected will be highlighted in the corner of the state node. Multi-state management is useful for reducing the number of steps for creating interaction design flows. If an object from that selection needs a different state from the others, simply click out and edit that individual state. The animation timeline helps you visualize your interaction design flow in a more traditional timeline view. Similar to tween animation and motion graphics software, here you'll be able to visualize your key in and out animations and modify them to suit your needs. Note that this view is most valuable for trigger objects indicated in the hierarchy panel with a lightning bolt. If a trigger object is set to self, you'll only see a single bar in the timeline. However, if you have a trigger element that activates multiple other assets, it will detail the transitions it will activate in its timeline view. In this example, you can select a button to see what panels it makes appear or disappear. Here you can visualize timing, ordering, and transition curves for your animations and modify them to suit your needs. We've covered the concept of statefulness, a recap of the user interface focusing on interaction design, how to create states, interactions, triggers, and the animation timeline. You now have the foundational understanding of the most powerful feature of Bezi, the state machine. Take it further by learning about other powerful interaction design features such as behaviors, colliders, and body rig. We'll be seeing you there.